Hi, everybody. I'm so thrilled to be with you. I love coming to the Forbes Women's Summit. I love getting ideas here, and I always feel motivated afterwards, and I hope that you guys do as well. So particularly to talk at this moment in time. We're at, I think, a crossroads in terms of, Me Too, Time's Up, things like that, and if this is a moment or a movement. And I think that these women have some thoughts on that. So just so everybody knows where I'm coming from, there has been a cataclysm in my business of broadcast news over the past 2 years. If 2 years ago anybody had told me that the biggest names in my business, like Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly, Charlie Rose, Mark Halperin, Matt Lauer, would be gone in the space of 18 months, I would never have believed it. And yet, the question that I get all the time is, now what? And that's where these ladies come in. So, just to bring in everybody and tell you all a little bit more about where they're coming from, Kirsten Green is one of Silicon Valley's most celebrated and well-known venture capitalists, and has not only led some of the industry's largest recent exits, Jet.com, Dollar Shave Club, and has also invested in many of the fastest-growing female founders in recent years. Kirsten is also a founding member of All Raise, which is a group of women venture capitalists working to change the industry from within in collaboration with Time's Up, so you will tell us all about that. Desiree Gruber founded Full Picture, an award-winning multimedia agency. She advises organizations from Google to L'Oreal around how they can better channel their resources to expand their social impact and close gender gaps, something we're all interested in. She also introduced the Plus One initiative, which was created to connect women in the entertainment industry across all professional levels, inspired by, in her words, the simple desire to get more women in the room where it happens. Laudable.
Amen. Yes.
Laudable goal. Olivia Milch recently made her debut feature as a writer-director of Dude, which is currently on Netflix, and as co-screenwriter of the global hit Ocean's 8, both featuring, of course, strong all-female ensembles, which is in line with Olivia's mandate to tell stories about women. So I'm thrilled to be able to talk to all of you guys. Okay, so Olivia, let me just start with you.
Absolutely.
Because, as I was saying, in terms of the biggest names in my business who crashed and burned in the past 2 years, obviously everybody knows about Harvey Weinstein. And I'm wondering, since that became public, if you in Hollywood have felt any difference, if Hollywood feels as though it's in the middle of some sort of seismic shift.
Absolutely. I think all of us right now, as women or female-identifying folks in society, are reckoning with the very public reckoning with what it actually means to be a woman in most public spaces. And the sad reality is that I think most of us knew that truth. It's just now it's being talked about on a kind of global scale, which I think is really important and amazing. I think that in our industry specifically, there tends to be, and I'm sure you feel this way too, that there's this attitude that we're very liberal and we're very enlightened, and and in some ways there can be it's sort of more aggressive almost to the sexism that occurs because it's under this cover of, oh, well, we all know we're joking when we say these things or make these inappropriate comments or touch these people in ways they don't want to be touched. And I think sometimes it can give it a cover that feels harder to deal with, particularly as a young person or a young woman in the field. So I think right now everybody's a lot more on their toes and behaving in ways that are a lot more thoughtful, and whether or not that's motivated by fear or, we don't care. Yeah. We're glad that people are thinking more thoroughly about the way that they're behaving and engaging with others, and being just more considerate of what it feels like to be in workplaces that can oftentimes be really personal and intimate. Mm-hmm. So I think it's been amazing, and I think it's something we should really be celebrating.
I totally relate to that in terms of people being on notice. I don't know where it leads exactly, but I know that at this moment, people are on notice in my business. Okay, so Kirsten, Silicon Valley, obviously, we have learned.
Yeah, we don't have people that are as famous in households as the news and the entertainment industry, but we also had kind of prominent figures in our industry get called out publicly and lost their jobs and such. And I actually think I'm incredibly optimistic today, because the reality is issues that have been coming to the forefront over the last year and a half through conversation have been going on forever, and nobody has been talking about them, and nobody has been being shamed for them, and nobody has been feeling empowered by some camaraderie that comes up to kind of rise together with it. And now, with it happening on such a big scale across so many industries, there's, I think, really this feeling of enough, no more. It's got to change. And it's not about, you know, complaining or kind of having side conversations. It's about kind of taking the conversation to the next level and making it about action for a different future. And that feels optimistic.
Desiree, how do you see this moment?
Well, I think, picking up where Kirsten left off, we're talking about action now. So I was in a room with a lot of powerful women in New York, and we said, what can we do tomorrow? Like, everybody's like, oh, can I join? Can we have a meeting? And it's like, okay, we've had a lot of meetings. What can we actually do tomorrow? And how can we be intentional about helping women that we know? And it was sort of like, how do you bring more women in the room where it happens? Because there's this sort of mystical room where it happens. And it's, we all know, we've been in there, it's mostly men, and a lot of times you're the only woman in there. And could we just start bringing more women in that room and saying, hey, I don't want to be in a room with all men. We've got to have a few women in this room. So we started that, and what we found is that a lot of times women who are not in the room where it happens, there's a huge sort of a fear barrier for them to get in the first time. It's sort of like, oh, what's happening? Am I prepared? Am I this? And we've let them stay out by this sort of fear.
What happens? Who else is in there?
Yeah, it's sort of like this fearful thing that we've let them go on, and it's like, okay, let's drop that, and let's be the ones to hand-to-hand combat. Everybody in this room could actually take action today, tomorrow, and the next day, and fill other women in on what's going on in these meetings. Hey, I just came out of a meeting. This is what's going on. This is something you might want to think about, because I want you in that room next time. Are you doing this? Are we doing that? Do you know this person? Make sure to say hi to them. Let's get them operationally more involved. And I think it's small steps. It's not like, yes, I think the big steps are happening, and I think they're on notice, which is key. But I'm saying on a daily basis, how are we as a group actually taking action? And you don't have to be a member of a group. You don't have to know somebody at the powerful top. All you have to do is intentionally every day take an action towards another woman that will help them demystify this process and give them some info that is power.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to do.
And so that's your +1 initiative.
It's a +1 times 3. So the idea is you bring a woman in the room where it happens. Maybe that's a networking event, that's a meeting, and then actually times 3 their relationship. So I found, you know, I piloted this, so I'm like, hey, let me do it. So I had my first +1 with me in a cab. We're racing to an event, and I'm so excited. I'm like, I'm doing a +1. And I realized, I don't know a doggone thing about it. And I go, what do you do? She's like, she works for me. I don't know. And she says, I'm in sales, and my problem is only my boss has the leads. So I'm always like, just like servicing her leads. She's like, I would love, if I knew people and could bring home a big fish, she's like, it could be a game changer. And I was like, oh, no. And I was on a mission. I was like, we are bringing home some big fish today. And Beth Comstock was in the room, and I was like, Beth, here we go. We've got somebody. And we just like went through the room, and we networked with intention. It was actually one of my favorite nights out in a long time, because the pressure was off me. And I was like, let's network for you. Let's plus your network. And we did it. And it's been so much more fun for me being out in the field now, thinking about other women. And people are lining up after events and saying, hey, I'm dying to know this person, or I've always wanted to get in. What do you think? And I'm giving out advice that's very intentional and directed. But the one thing I will say for women who do want to get this advice, be specific about your ask. So the worst thing is when somebody says, I want to be like you. I want to be successful. It's like, that's not helpful to me. Who are 2 people you know you need to know that would actually change the game for you? And if you're armed and ready with that, when you're in front of the people who could help you, and you say, hey, I'd love to know this casting director. I've always wanted to meet that director. And they'll be like, oh my God, his assistant's my best friend. I'm getting you in. So it's like, we have a network. We know where people are. We just got to use it for other women and bring it up to the top.
I think networking is great. Networking has helped me throughout my career a lot. I try to pay it back by being a connector for our interns and for our production assistants. I think networking is key, but I like your idea of just putting it to math, you know? Like, just invite one woman and exponentially multiply that by 3 and introduce her around in these networking events. Like, that's a real call to action that I can get my arms around.
It is. Networking gets a bad rap, let's be honest. Like, oh, they're networking, they're this and that. And there's a study that just came out of the London School of Economics. It's in the Wall Street Journal. You should Google it. It's a very, very interesting, insightful article. And it's like, we don't want to network because we don't want to be seen as being this,
calculated.
And men have no problem being calculated because they bring each other into the zone and say, like, hey, let me give you the one one-to-one advice.
Right.
And so we're missing that. If we're not networking, we're really not getting the benefits of the people that we know and getting it. I mean, if we know men are doing it in this heavy way, how are we not doing that? So I've really been intentional about it. And I find even, my company, Full Picture, we work with some of the top female CEOs in the world, and they're dedicated, driven women, but they're not focused on being networked. And so that's one of the things that we do is we say like, hey, take 5 minutes and think about your convening power.
Yep.
Who are you bringing together? Let's do one dinner a month where you bring 6 women together, talk about something, and great things will come out of it. And it's intentional, it's emotional, it's an incredible way of doing business, and we're missing out if we're not doing it when we know that all these male CEOs are doing it.
That leads us to Ocean's 8.
The best network.
That's the natural segue to Ocean's 8. So having an all-female ensemble, look, I mean, I remember the backlash and the nasty things that happened with Ghostbusters. This time around, do you feel that it was different? And what did you do? And what has been the reaction to focusing on a women's, co-opting a story and making it a women's story and an all-female cast?
Absolutely. I think we've been very fortunate. I think we've been really received with open arms, and I think audiences were really ready to see a film that was celebrating a group of women working together to get something done. I think the idea that a group of women can't do something is this fallacy that exists in our society. We make a lot of jokes about it, and the reality is every person in this room knows that anything that's ever gotten done has been because a group of women got together to do it.
Totally.
So I think that we're in a moment in time where people were really ready to celebrate that. I think especially when the trailer came out, we had been really inundated with a lot of the painful, reckoning with what had occurred in terms of Me Too and Time's Up. And I think this came out and people were ready to celebrate what is delightful and joyful and possible when a group of women get together. So I think we were really fortunate in that, and that I think a heist movie in and of itself, obviously it's Oceans, and we love that franchise, but it's a heist movie, and that doesn't feel I think Ghostbusters really had to deal with the fact that people coveted and loved and felt a lot of nostalgia for that piece. And this movie, although people, of course, love that franchise, there was a little bit less of that, so I don't think we had to deal with that as much. And it's been just such an incredible experience to get texts from friends being like, I'm in a theater full of women, and especially young women, who are cheering and so excited to be able to see all of these different kinds of women on screen. And I think for us that was a huge part of it, to see 8 diverse women from different backgrounds coming together, and different ages too, which is another really important aspect of it, coming together to get something done. So I think we've been really lucky, and it's been a really exciting time for it to be in the world.
That's so exciting. I wonder if your earring is hitting
Probably.
the-
I'm so sorry. You guys, I don't know how to deal with being
Oh,
mic'd. My voice is so loud normally.
Maybe that, let me see if that works any better. And so, but Olivia, do you think that, so was this just a fun exercise and a really fun thing to watch and great and inspirational, or do you think that it moves the needle? Do you think that because you were able to pull this off and write this screenplay, that it changes something?
I do think it changes something. I think that...
Yeah, put it back up to your mouth, and I think that it's going to work.
Hey.
Oh,
There
wow.
you are.
That is working. That is really working.
I feel like I'm like, hi, my name's Olivia. You called for now. I think that any time that we have economic success on a female venture, it's a good thing. You don't ever, especially in this industry, it's like you don't ever want the box office but I think it's important that people know that these are things that people want to see and are excited to see. So I think that always kind of moves the needle a little bit, and I think there's been a lot of wonderful discussion happening around the fact that we need more opportunities for different voices, for LGBTQ voices, for marginalized, women of color especially, to have the opportunity to make film, make television, because we can't always be held to the standard that if a movie that has women in it or a movie that has people of color in it doesn't do well, that then we're not going to get the chance to do it again, which I think now that's sort of been rectified, but I think for a long time people were afraid that, oh shoot, well, if this doesn't do well, we're never going to get to do it again. So I think that anytime it does well and anytime there's a positive reception, you're really excited, because I think it means that more voices are going to get heard. And I think the point Desiree is making is so on point, that you have to keep the tent is big and you have to keep the door open. And how do you then use this opportunity and this success to say, there are more voices whose stories need to be told, and we're going to hold the door open for them and say, come on in and let's do this and empower those voices. So I think that's what the possibility of something like this movie, I think, can do.
That's awesome. So, Kirsten, tell us about All Raise and what you're trying to do with that.
Yeah, so our industry might be somewhat representative of other industries in that there's just a huge imbalance between men and women. There's also just a huge imbalance in diversity in general. And the statistic is that there's only 7% of female general partners at venture capital firms. So venture capital is still a fairly small industry, but it's an important industry because there's money going to fund new companies that are shaping our society going forward. And I think, to have the decision-making power, the check-writing power in such a skewed, portion of the population with men, that really leads to kind of skewed teams getting funded, which ultimately leads to skewed outcomes in terms of companies scaling. And so I think that's just something that, again, in this moment of conversation has really been brought to the forefront. That's an issue that needs to be solved. And so we said, as women in the industry, the good news and the bad news is that with only 7%, we can basically get in touch with all of each other. And let's start, let's start building some stronger connections between ourselves. So really, it kind of started with this idea of networking. It started with this idea of like, hey, in our business, a big, underlying sustained factor for it is deal flow, is sharing information about what new companies you saw, or what companies you funded, or what companies are looking for money. And men have done that so casually for forever, as they have more prominence in the industry and just communicate that way. And women, I think, I know my life is I've got 2 small kids at home. I get up in the morning, I kind of do everything to try to get them off the house to school, get to work, do my work, power of being present, get as much done as you can during the day to go home and spend time with them. And so the extra time to go out and do networking and socialize is just harder. So I think, it's another one of those reasons we just have to be that much more efficient. In any event, this group of women got together and we said, let's start engaging with each other with more intention around kind of sharing some of these things and helping each other. And it felt really constructive and it felt positive that we were doing that, but we thought this is too small of a conversation with 30 of us in the room. We need to make it bigger. And so we started to kind of put some formal action behind it. And I think everybody feels really empowered by the action. Let's not sit around and complain about it or whine about it or be in small groups and talk about it. Let's really try to put some initiatives to get some change happening. And so at All Raise, we have a number of working groups. They will expand and flux over time, but the ones that we launched with were female founder office hours, where women venture capitalists, we opened the doors to invite other women to come and do a learning session around how to pitch or how to put together a pitch deck for an investor, and then to come in and have sort of a safe space, a one-on-one to ask questions and get educated on it. Hopefully just, again, to build a bond, open the door, have some connections, build some confidence with each other, and make some introductions afterwards. And that's going strong. We've done it in a number of cities now. We've had several hundred female entrepreneurs come through. We have something called Founders for Change, which had a pretty good media blitz, which was just basically getting founders of companies together saying, diversity matters to us. We are, trying to build companies that are shaping the future going forward. The future looks like a diverse population. It's men, it's women, it's people of all ethnicities and lifestyles, and we are building companies like that, and we expect our investors to be like that. And if you don't have teams like that, we're not going to take your money anymore. So at the end of the day, if you're a venture capitalist, that's your client you're trying to serve, and if they're telling you we don't like your product unless it's diverse, you got to do something about it. And that's really powerful. We had 700 companies join when we first launched it, and since then we've continued to add hundreds. So that's been pretty powerful.
That is
and
powerful.
I won't bore everybody with all of the events, but I think, or all of the initiatives, but the point is there's been some action and intention behind it, and some real bonds that are getting formed, which is the side product of all of that, but as powerful as anything.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought up the sort of action items, because let's talk about that. I mean, let's talk about how we make sure this isn't just a moment, that it is in fact a movement, and it has some staying power. And so for everybody here, what is the one sort of call to action that you would recommend that people can do in their own lives, right now, to sort of further the cause that we're all here for, of women's empowerment, of bringing women to the table, of changing the bad behavior, all of that stuff. What do you want people to take away? Anybody?
I'll take that.
Yep.
Because I'm riffing off of you. I sound like I'm a PSA for networking here. I'm not.
We all do. It's
I know,
okay.
no,
We're bond together
But
in that.
when you said you have 10 things to do that night, you got to get home, you've got kids, we're all feeling guilty on every side of the table here. But the thing about networking is it's about recency, and the science shows that people you've recently seen, you will call, and they will come back quicker to your memory. So if people are not seeing you, and you're not being, so don't go to an event and say, oh, I'm gonna have a drink and get out of here quickly. Circulate, get around the room. And I do this thing where I make it a double or a triple. So if I'm gonna go somewhere, I like think in advance, okay, I wanna see this person, I'm gonna talk to so-and-so about this. We have targets and goals. My team sends me in and they're like, hey, today, they said Mindy Grossman's gonna be there. Make sure you get in front of Mindy. Mindy's a good friend. So, but it's like, there's nothing like seeing Mindy face to face. And we had, in fact, my executive, sitting right there, ran into Mindy earlier and she's like, Desiree's coming. And she was like, okay. Like, it's like we have a mission. So
That's
make
really
it a double
good.
or a
Have
triple.
an
And I'm like,
intention.
I'm gonna talk to
Yeah.
Mindy. I'm gonna pass out a certain amount of business cards and I'm gonna do something, or I'm gonna find out, I'm gonna soak in the speech, I'm gonna sit in the front row and I'm gonna take notes, and then I'm gonna scoot out and get home in time to put my son to bed. But I'm intentional and I make it a double or a triple, and I will not leave until I have my triple. So
That's really
that's like,
good.
it's like a way for you to check it and allow yourself to go out. And then once you hit your triple, I mean, if you're like a go-getter, you can say, I'm going for a home run. I'm going to see one more person before I leave. If not, you can say, I got a triple, basta, goodbye. And sometimes you're shocked you'll get a triple real fast. And you're like, it's 7:20, I can go. But the recency thing is so
I'm
important.
going to follow this advice.
Me
It's
too.
very
People
good.
have
It's
it
really
See,
good.
what
I-
Aileen Lee and I were talking about the other day, recency. If they haven't seen you, they're not going to call you on a deal. They're not going to think about you to offer you a job. People have to see you in some way or another. And sometimes the other thing I do is I just call people out of the blue. So I have a list, and I think about people that I call you out of the blue. Do I or do I not call you out of the blue?
really bad I haven't shown up at the last 3 things.
That's okay. But did I just send you a gift a few weeks ago?
You did.
Because
did.
I want
like
her to send
this.
me deal flow. So if I don't ever talk to her and let her know I'm interested in investing, she's not going to think of me. So I'll look through my list and I'll think, hey, it's the same thing with actors and directors. Hollywood is the most famous. That's one thing they get right. It's called rolling calls. So the executives are in the car in the morning, they're going to work, and they say, call the head of this studio, call the head of that studio. Because if you don't know real-time information of what director, what script is coming in, there could be the hottest script in town. And if you're not hearing about it, you better believe that Tom Cruise or Nicole Kidman is going to be so angry when it goes, and they didn't even hear about it or read the script. You will be dead. So it's like, no, that's a thing. So it's recency. Get yourself out there, and you will be surprised the things that will come back, and you'll be like, oh, it's magic. It's not magic. It's just being seen. But we could call it magic. So I do recency and triples.
Great, great advice. I'm going to do it tomorrow. Olivia, what's your call to action?
I have a sort of, they downgraded me because I couldn't handle the other mic. I didn't have my Britney in me. I have a sort of more slightly antiquated version of that, or like more epistolary, but it's email, so it's not that antiquated, which is write letters. I feel like so many things have happened in my life because I wrote a well thought out, well crafted email and just spoke into existence what I wanted and reached out to the person and said, I love this thing, I'm enthusiastic about it. Is there any way I can be in service to you or to this project or this process? And it is remarkable, I think, what the impact that a well-written letter can have, and most people are always willing to have a coffee with you or a Skype with you and talk about it. You know, it's something that I incorporate into my week, like 2 to 3 times a week. I'm going to Skype with a young writer and talk to them and, you know, just give them that advice or reinforcement or say, you can do this, you have the strength, but most people are really willing to do that and excited about doing that. So I found that some of the biggest things that have happened to me in my life have been the result of writing a letter. And so even I love mingling and going to the parties. That's amazing. But if you have social anxiety or if that feels really daunting to you, getting your hands on somebody's email and assistants are amazing. And I think a lot of the time they're the ones with the real power in many industries. So reach out to your friends or reach out to people, and you can oftentimes get a hold of the email of somebody you really want to work with or admire, and just ask them for coffee or ask them what they're working on, how you can help. And a lot of the times I think that's really what ends up sort of shifting your path. Say what you want out loud and write a letter.
That's great. Love that too. All right.
Kind of similar, building off of that a little bit. I feel like there was a time period in my career where I really needed advice, I needed encouragement, I needed support, I needed connections, and people were really generous with me. I was scared to ask, but I asked, and people offered up some insights that I took to heart, and I was, always really grateful, and it meant a lot, and it empowered me in many ways. And today, and I think in general, like, I'm a yes person. I love to help people. I love to do things, and I'm in the business that I'm in. I've ironically found myself in the business of saying no, where we look at 2,000 investment proposals a year to make 4 or 5 investments, and so that's a lot of no's. And we have a policy in our team, which is you respond to every single email that comes in the door, no matter what, because somebody's coming forward and sharing their dream and putting themselves out there, and the least you can do, even if it's not a fit or you don't have time, is to acknowledge it and respond to it. But I started feeling really depressed last year, thinking, I'm so busy, I'm saying no to everybody all the time, and I really had to contemplate that for a while, and kind of remembered back how people were generous to me, how much of an impact it made for me. And now I've sort of said every week I'm going to take one meeting that is not about me, that is not about my business or something that's helping me, but it's about helping somebody else, and put some of that back out there, because we do need help from each other. We do need help, and we do need support, and it can come in unlikely places. And so I think to just keep that in mind and keep putting that out there, and giving and taking is positive.
That is also such a great message. I do think there's something karmically rewarding about, helping out. Even if you need help, there's always somebody else who is at a different rung than you are, and you can.
I mean, and selfishly, to be honest, I'm doing it. I'm hoping to have impact for other people, but I'm doing it for myself too, because it makes me feel good to be part of, hopefully helping somebody and making them feel more empowered.
Absolutely. All right, we have a minute and a half left. Who has a question? Who has a burning question? Huh?
Oh no! Come on.
Oh, I know. It's just because. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
And we discovered that, just on your point about networking, and we discovered this today, that we talk and we network and we get caught up on just relationships and a lot of this woman stuff and kumbaya. And we don't talk about doing business.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I just asked her directly, do you have some work for me? And she said, yeah, I do. And I didn't even think about you.
Yeah.
So, and just in terms of just in general, and I think that women need to just ask for business and say, I'm looking for business, and I wanted to get your take on that. Do you find sometimes women dance around that?
Yeah,
Actually, I'm here to do
that's
business.
good advice. You got to put it out there and ask for it.
And that's
For
what I was
sure.
saying before. You got to have a few asks in your pocket. And I love what you said, because no matter what level you're on, you always need assistance to get to the next level. And you always have a magic wand to help somebody here. So it's that constant balance of making sure. I was talking to Diane von Furstenberg last week, and I was telling her about the +1 × 3, and I'm like, we need your support. And she said, oh, darling, she goes, everybody has a magic wand. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, oh, every woman has a magic wand. There's something you know that you could give to somebody else that will enlighten them, that will clarify something, that will give them the ability to take action that they didn't have. So it's that doing it, but also making the ask, because you need somebody else's magic wand. So I always have a few pocket things that I'm thinking about. God, if I only had this, or if I knew that person, or there's always something that's a mystery. Let's be honest. You get to the next level and you're like, oh wow, I want to go there now. And there's mysteries to get there. So be ready with an ask, and don't be afraid to. If you ask smartly, that's what I said before. Anybody in here today can write me an email. If you have a smart ask, I will reply. It's when it's a meandering, like, I'm not sure, and I'm thinking about business, but I'm not sure. I might want to open that one, but maybe this one. It's like, okay, sit with your friends and family, get your direction. No, and I say that to people too when we talk about storytelling. Like, practice with your friends and family. They can tell you. Say to somebody like, hey, what do you think my 3 greatest strengths are? And they'll be like, you're a good talker. You're this. You're a solution-oriented person. People will tell you, and then you'll be like, oh, wow, I am. Okay, great. Let me think about how I might say that. And the other thing is practice your ask. Think about it and say it a few times. Don't just say it in your head. I know this is so difficult to do, because you can say things in your head. You all know this.
Yeah.
And you get there and the cat has your tongue. You're like, ugh. And you're like, I just missed my total opportunity. Say it out loud. Call a friend, your best friend, your brother, your mother, whoever it is, and say, I want to say this. How does this come out? And just the act of saying it, you will be so shocked when you get in front of other people, and then it will just come, and you'll be like, I can't believe I just said that.
Absolutely.
I made my ask.
I agree.
I mean, you see this all the time.
Yeah, listen, guys, on the cutting to the chase, I'm getting the hard rap. We got to go. That's it. Yeah, you guys, ladies, thank you so much. Great, great advice. Excellent.